forward to the, there we go. Thanks everybody for your patience. So you can see the screen?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Well, I'm David Geese, and with me is Terry Jones. We're really pleased and honored to share this next few minutes with you. So thank you so much for the invitation, and we hope you'll come to Colorado sometime and join one of our meetings. We broadcast them as well every fourth Monday of the month, and it's great to be with you here today. Terry and I have titled this little talk, Keeping Time with the American West. Let me see if I can move slides now, okay. So researching the May DNF clock tower, seeing the building in lower downtown, we cannot help but reflect on the turn of the century and the changes that have taken place in our own lifetimes, as well as our parents and the generation before them. It wasn't all that long ago. In the 1800s, Colorado was inhabited by the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Utes. By the time the 1840s and the gold rush of the 50s, Colorado's population exploded, fostering development, economic growth, conflict. The DNF Tower is so much a part of Denver's personality and that growth that's taken place. In the first 2 decades of the 21st century is a stunning journey to recall the generations of William B. Daniels, who established the Denver Dry Goods Company. The Daniels family left behind the historic Seth Thomas Tower clock. Other families of the era add to the personality of Denver. Colorado has a long-lasting list of notables, past and present, resulting in the private sector philanthropy we appreciate in the state today. Charles Becher, a 17-year-old German immigrant in 1869, followed his brother to Wyoming, working in a hardware store long enough to move to Denver and open up his own shop. An observant entrepreneur, he began a blasting powder company selling explosives to miners, established the Ideal Cement Company, and was the first to import sugar beets. This after a trip back to Germany, resulting in Colorado's Great Western Sugar Company. Adolph Coors and his brewing company, Spencer Penrose in mining and real estate, the creator of the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, now owned by Philip Anschutz, Frederick Bonfils and Harry Tauman, the Denver Post, and Edward Wynkoop, a soldier of distinction, peacekeeper, and early advocate for social justice. Wynkoop is remembered for his persistence in pursuing the honest account of the massacre resulting in the deaths of 140, mostly women, children, and elderly at Sand Creek. My connection with the tower is through the Bonfils-Stanton Foundation, where I worked and whose office was on the 5th floor. The Bonfils-Stanton Foundation contributed to saving the tower. Charles Edwin Stanton was the noted interior designer at the May DNF department store in the 1950s. May Bonfils met Charles at Central City Opera. Over time, she grew fond of Charles and hired him to oversee the renovation of her mansion on the Belmar estate. They were married in a civil ceremony in 1956. She was 73 and he was 46. Part of the 208-acre estate became the site of Villa Italia Shopping Center and the location of Lakewood City Hall. After her death, the home was eventually demolished when the archdiocese no longer found a purpose for it. The elegant water fountain near her home was purchased by a foundation and donated to the city of Denver. Today it stands in the Hungarian Freedom Park at Spear and Clarkson Street and is one of the few items remaining from her home and reclusive lifestyle. A few words about Frederick Bonfils, her father. Today, there's a plaque in front of the Bonfils building in Guthrie, Oklahoma. It recalls the reputation of Frederick Bonfils. In 1890, Bonfils lived on the second floor of the building pictured here. He was the son of a Missouri judge and descendant of Napoleon. At 28 years old, he joined the land rush of 1889. A colorful con man, the plaque says, and lottery promoter. He was known for his confidence games that ultimately led the people of Guthrie to leave town. Among his schemes was selling town lots in Oklahoma City at bargain prices, but they were in Oklahoma City, Texas, not Oklahoma, as most supposed. Bonfils also invented a money-making machine, which duped early settlers into believing the machine made large bills out of small ones. But plaque concludes by reporting Bonfils moved to Denver and was the co-founder of the Denver Post. He died in 1932, a wealthy and national figure in the United States. Going back to William B. Daniels, in 1864, Daniels, having stores in Leavenworth, Kansas, sent J.M. Eckhart to Denver with a wagon load of merchandise, setting up shop from the wagon near the corner of Blake and 15th Street, the launching of the Denver Dry Goods Store. This is the same era as Charles Betcher and the opening of his hardware store here pictured in Leadville. In 1861, Daniels employed William Garrett Fisher, who he had met in Iowa City. Daniels was impressed with the young man, and by 1872, Eckhart was retiring. Fisher bought out Eckhart, and the Denver Dry Goods Company became Daniels and Fisher. W.B. Daniels died in 1890 and was succeeded by his son, William Cook Daniels, who purchased Fisher's interest around 1897 at the time of Fisher's death. Daniels had many ideas for expanding the business, including the vision for building the tallest tower west of the Mississippi. After visiting Venice, and true to his interest in the arts, he modeled the tower after the Campanelli at St. Mark's Square. And this is a picture of the plaza at St. Mark's Basilica in Venice and the tower that was modeled for the one here in Denver. This is a recent picture. There was a previous tower which had been replaced over the years. The tower was not without publicity stunts. In 1918, local climber Jack the Human Fly Williams climbed effortlessly to the top of the tower. William Ivy Baldwin, famed Colorado balloonist and aerialist, walked a tightrope between one of the upper floors and the top of a nearby building. Carl Sandel, the 7-foot-tall doorman, started as a security guard during the construction of the tower in 1912, except for time served in World War I and a short stint as a Secret Service agent for President Coolidge in 1925. He was a popular figure at the tower and was there until his retirement in 1961. The height of the tower did attract some trouble. In the 1920s, a student nurse was on the observation deck late one spring day. She lost her gloves and was looking over the edge to see if she could find them when she partially lost consciousness and fell from the 20th floor. She was found 38 hours later on the balcony of the 17th floor, rushed to the hospital and made full recovery. However, in October of 1920, a despondent man tried to commit suicide by jumping from the 20th floor. He too landed on the 17th floor, but died from his injuries shortly thereafter. Because the tower remained the tallest building in downtown Denver, its bell clapper was removed to make room for a light beacon installed to watch for enemy aircraft during World War II. The tower also served as a call for citizens to buy war bonds to support the war effort. In later years, the searchlight was a great way to advertise special sales at May D&F department store. On October 21 of 1955, convalescing President Eisenhower emerged from Fitzsimmons Hospital after suffering a heart attack, wearing a custom-made pair of May D&F silk pajamas embroidered with "Much better, thanks." Connected to the north side of the tower was the Daniels and Fisher store, employing hundreds of people. Home delivery was available, and Baby Doe Taylor used the service according to the store records. Manufactured in 1911, the Seth Thomas clock 19 strike was purchased for $8,000 and mounted in the tower. It was purchased for this amount according to one of the documents that Terry and I were able to find in the Denver Public Library. I'm not sure that $8,000 is quite correct. There were so many. There was another document that said it wasn't quite that much. But this is a picture of the tower, of the clock as it exists today. The movement, it's not displayed to the public. Terry and I were invited to see the clock stored and tucked away behind lobby doors. Placards displayed on the clock describe the movement and striking of the bell operation. It appears to be in very good condition, but missing the escapement and other wheels, hopefully stored in the tower. This picture shows how the movement was placed in the tower behind the four clock faces. The weights extended down from the floor in which the movement was housed, and the pendulum hung down into the bottom floor as well. Around 1998, and for several years, the movement was visible in the lobby. The Seth Thomas number 19 strike was described as a width of 85 inches, a depth of 50 inches, a height of 76 inches, with a 14-foot pendulum and a ball weighing 550 pounds. It would operate one dial of 22 feet or four dials of 18 feet or less, and it weighed 4,900 pounds. The catalog here, where it does list the $8,000 figure, also lists a number 18 Seth Thomas, which is a little bit smaller. However, the pendulum is still 14 feet long. The pendulum ball weighs 325 pounds versus the larger 550 on the number 19 clock. Packed and ready to go, it was 3,300 pounds when it was shipped. As Terry and I looked through the archives at the Denver Public Library, we ran across this sketch from Gensler and Associates, the architects who in the 1990s were suggesting the clock could actually operate when it was in the lobby. And this sketch, and I'm sorry it's not clear for us to look at, shows the lobby and the staircase that goes up into the tower. But the design and the idea was for the public in the 1990s to get to see the clock movement and its operation. It has the counterweight going down into the basement and room for the pendulum and pendulum ball to swing from the basement while the clock would be operating in the lobby. This is a picture of the movement behind the glass on the first floor in the lobby, and the pulley layout going up into the atrium, potentially two floors up, and then carrying the weight into the basement. We don't think that this actually came to fruition, but the design was certainly there. The clock, however, was in the lobby for several years, and folks could see its dials and wheels, and it's really a beautiful piece of movement. Let me pass the baton on to my partner Terry Jones, and let Terry take it from here.
Next slide. Thank you, David. Welcome. We're happy to be giving this little presentation to the ZIA group in Albuquerque. My personal experience, as Buzz mentioned, one of your members was there in the early days. I was a teenager growing up on the western slope of Colorado, and when my folks would come through Denver, it was the rage to go up to the tower deck, and that was one of the tallest buildings in Denver at that time, and you could view the skyline and then the entire city. So I remember that in the late 1950s. What was going on prior to that time, I wanted to give a little bit of history. The department stores were declining after World War II. And so along came a guy in 1953 to Denver by the name of William Zeckendorf. And he acquired controlling interest from Daniels and Fishers. In 1958, after more mergers, the store was moved to the Courthouse Square at Tremont and Court Place and became May DNF. And those people that might have visited there in the 60s and even up to the 70s remember an ice skating rink, and there was a tea room in the May DNF store, and the tower was just left alone sitting there in lower downtown. So we had this era of the 1960s to the 70s where lower downtown near Union Station, which had always been the hub of Denver, that was now falling into urban decay, that bad word. And so in 1967, the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, also known as DURA, was created. In 1971, the 5-story department store that had been sitting next to the tower all these years was demolished. December of '69, the tower was listed by a group of preservationists on the National Register for Historic Properties. And this was a group of citizens that formed this Denver Landmark Preservation Commission, and they convinced the city council that this tower should be preserved. August of '76, there was inspection of the DNF tower and a detailed report of the deterioration of the building and the status of the clock, conducted by Jim Hartman, who was on the Historic Preservation Commission. And he sent a letter to Stephen Hart, who was one of the officers there. And we found this in the Denver Public Library, the State Historical Society. This was the first mention of the clock maintenance by, they said, an employee of William Crowe Jewelry, 1910 16th Street. Well, this would have been Wes Van Avery. And I knew Wes, and I'll mention more about him a little bit later. So he was fixing the clock, keeping it maintained just out of the goodness of his heart. I don't think he was getting paid at that time to do that. One of the interesting things on the inspection report Dead pigeons littered the floors from ill attempts to escape the tower after the pigeons had made entry through broken windows and open doors. And Wes Van Avery used to talk about the pigeon doo-doo all over the movement of the clock up in the tower. Okay, next slide. Now, during this time, there were legal battles going on from 74 to 75. There was a judge in Denver, Judge Araj, who was a Denver district judge. He ruled in favor of the preservationists, preserving the tower, which was now listed on the National Register. And the urban renewal people didn't like that, so they appealed it. So the case was appealed to the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. Finally, a year later, November of 76, it was getting close to being resolved. Stephen Hart had a press conference while awaiting the outcome of the pending lawsuit, and he expressed hope that a prompt and amicable agreement could be reached between Dura and HUD. Now you've got the federal government involved, the urban renewal branch of the federal government on the one hand, and the preservationists on the other hand. So there was this, everybody was waiting with bated breath to see what the appeals court was going to say. Next slide. January 6, 1977, the U.S. Court of Appeals, 10th District, affirmed the decision of the lower district court by unanimous vote in the DNF Tower case. Stephen Hart's letter followed. 4 days later, the effect of these decisions is to enjoin Dura and HUD from proceeding with the sale of the DNF Tower until they comply with the procedures provided with respect to historically significant properties. This means they cannot alter the tower in such a way as to adversely affect its architectural, historical, or cultural appearance without consultation and negotiation with the Colorado State Historical Society. So their hands were tied now. So now, what were they going to do? There had to be this cooperative venture going on, and it was going to be costly. The tower was saved now, but after 20 years of sitting dormant and caught up in a quagmire of financial problems and ownership confusion, different parts of the building were owned by different companies. Some of the land underneath the building was still owned by the heirs of John Alkier, who had signed a 99-year lease to Daniels and Fishers in 1909. There was even a Skyline Bank that was trying to get possession and put a bank in there during the late period prior to this final ultimate decision. Okay, next slide. So December of 79, Dura sold the tower to a real estate company and a developer who was a preservationist in Denver, David French and Company. He bought the building for $72,700. During the previous year, his company had worked on a plan to restore and convert the tower into office condominiums with the help of a guy by the name of Al Cohen, with Al Cohen Construction as a general contractor. At that time, I was going to Emily Griffith Opportunity School in the late 70s and early 80s, and Wes Van Avery was hired by David French to complete clock restoration. And this was during 1980-81. Wes would tell us these stories about there was no electricity in the building, so the elevators didn't work. So poor guy, he had to carry his tools all the way up the stairs to the tower, which was, 18th, 19th, 20th floor, and work on it. 1981, French and Company and contractors completed renovation into residential and office space in the tower at a cost of around $3.5 million. But French ran out of money before he could repair the tower's exterior. So in the 1990s, some of the tenants in the tower, Richard Hensel, was one of them, and Michael Urbana. They spearheaded an extensive renovation effort with the help of the State Historical Fund, and they got some more grants totaling over $500,000. Next slide. 1966 to 2007. Now you can see the price was running way up. $5 million was spent on restoration of the exterior, the entrances, the lobby, the Seth Thomas clock, the observation deck, and the cupola. Skyline Bank had done away with some of the marble walls that were in there. At the time that the 5-story DNF department store was there, it was really a luxury building. There was marble walls on the interior. They even had a school for young women that worked at the DNF department store next to the tower, and they would school the young women in a location on one of the floors in the tower and teach them good salesmanship so they could work there. So the tower was really well crafted at the time, and now they had to do this preservation. So April of 1996, there was a draft letter from Edward White, State Historical Society, to Randall Hensel, the Preservation Foundation, outlining plans for West Van Avery to complete the clock works and the movement display and put it in the atrium on the ground level of the tower for public display. This included exhibit signage in the atrium window. Now, we believe that at that time is when the clock was electrified. So the clock was no longer working with the movement when West Van Avery and did the, took the movement out and put it on the ground floor. 2006, there was a cabaret called the Clock Tower Cabaret, an entertainment venue that opened in the basement of the tower. Lanny Garrett, a well-known vocalist and instrumentalist and entertainer in Denver, owned and managed that cabaret right up until recently, the records show until 2016. Well, that created a problem for the clock display on the ground floor. As you all know, you've heard of American with Disabilities Act, the ADA. That was expanded in September 2010 and clarified, which required better access for people with disabilities into public buildings. This required a new elevator be placed in the tower lobby for the basement business, which had been a public entertainment nightclub over the years. So we think that that's why they had to move the display, the beautiful display, and now it's behind a marble wall in the stairwell of the main entry, and it's not open to the public. Next slide. The result is it was forced to be relegated to the safe place behind the locked entry marble wall. The pendulum and other clock apparatus, we were told, is currently in storage in a basement closet. We didn't go down there to see it that day. The clock was electrified around 1996 when the movement was moved to the atrium for display. Prior to this time, the pendulum and weights had been housed between the 17th and 20th floors. Next. Other owners over the years, one of the most colorful uses was the late 1960s when the tower was home to a radio station. KBPI was a rock station owned by Bill Pearson. He refused an order to vacate by the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, and he stayed on until the early 1970s. For several years, the records show, during this time frame, electricity was cut off to the tower, so Pearson had to climb a silo ladder in the elevator shaft to reach the staircase on the 6th floor before climbing the staircase to the 20th floor where the station's broadcast studio was located. He also purportedly ran an extension cable from sympathetic neighbors to the studio and to his transmitter, which was mounted next to the flagpole. By the way, there was electrification in the early 1900s, and there was an electric flag. There's an old picture in the library showing an electrified American flag in the tower in the early 1900s to support the war bonds and all that. Fred Larkin owned Larkin Photography, and he was the longest tenant in the tower for 20 years with his studio on the second floor. Another person later came along, Rich Keilberg, president of Communications Broadcasting. He purchased the 5-floor penthouse unit in the tower, the top 5 floors, for $700,000, December 2000. And Holly Larkin, the record show, which was his, Fred Larkin's, well, that's wrong. It's really Holly Keilberg. That's a misprint. That should be Holly Keilberg, the wife of Rich Keilberg. She listed the top 5 floors for sale in April of 2018 for $3.5 million. It didn't sell. Again, she put it on the market in 2019. It was listed for $4.5 million. And as far as the records show, it never sold. There was one reference I found in the internet where there was a problem with the fire code. So the Denver Fire Department, I believe, was putting the kibosh on selling that as any residential use. Next slide. The tower clock was electrified in recent years, and one of our members, Tim Schultz in the Boulder chapter, had been there about 9 years ago. Once every spring weekend, they open up the tower along with the Architectural Society of Denver, and I understand they encourage this nationally across all major cities. And they have people, Dawsons, who give tours of architectural buildings that are worthy of a tour to the public. So Tim Schultz had gone there 9 years ago and took these pictures of the clock movement as it exists now. Next slide. So you can see that some of this is electrified. We think that the panel on the lower right is a very sophisticated panel, because when you zoom in on that photo, they can turn a knob and change over from daylight savings time and back. So it's all done by a sophisticated electrified panel. I'm not sure what they do when the electricity, and we have a power outage in Denver, but somebody probably is called up to, readjust it. Next slide. This is an exterior shot. Interior, you can see that spiral staircase going up. Next slide. The summary. Today, the tower continues to house mostly office condominiums, as well as an events venue. On the very top floors that didn't sell, there's a venue there for weddings, and the cabaret still exists in the basement. Members of the public can access the tower's observation deck in April as part of the Doors Open Denver, or arrange private tours through Clock Tower Events that's on the website. Over the years, the ownership history has been as dramatic as the structure itself. The building has changed hands over and over. The tower was close to being torn down a number of times. The clock, even though it has been electrified, lives on as a symbol of a dynamic group of Denver citizens who had the foresight to preserve the past. Some of the creative things they do around Christmas time, they have an electronic light show, laser lights up on the face of the clock tower. On New Year's Eve, they set off some fireworks near the tower or off the tower, somewhere in that lower downtown area at New Year's. And I don't know, the tower still chimes every hour and a half hour. So anybody that would be making a residential condo out of that tower would have to put up with the 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, the tower chime. So that's all I have. Opening up to questions. There's some of our references. Buzz was mentioning that clock that I brought back from Chile that got me started in the NAWCC, and I have a photo of it. It's a WoodenWorks 8-day with the claw feet transitional clock, and just a beautiful clock. It was in a museum in Chile. What it was doing there, I don't know, but I brought it back, and it has a good label. It's in working condition and one of my favorite clocks. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was enjoyable.
Well, if I may have a few minutes of your time, I enjoyed this immensely. I lived in Denver from 1946 to 1957. I went to grade school, junior high, and the first year of high school there, excuse me, before moving to Texas. And the Daniels and Fisher store was a mecca for me. I mean, as a kid, it was just a wonderland of everything you always wanted. And even when I was in junior high, a good friend of mine and I used to take the bus downtown and buy Britain's Limited lead soldiers. And I still have a huge collection of them from that period that I've taken care of, including the Queen's coronation coach. And it just was such a significant part of my childhood that I'll always remember Daniels and Fisher. We were there, my wife and I, at a convention. I guess it's been 5 years ago maybe, and we could see the Daniels and Fisher Tower from our hotel room. And so we thought, wow, we got to walk down there and check it out. And we were very disappointed that the store itself no longer existed. We were able to just look there in the lobby, but we couldn't go any further. But anyway, to make a long story short, Daniels and Fisher has got a lot of memories for me.
Nice to know.
I had no idea that clock tower was that tall. Thank you for offering just to give us information. My goodness. Huh?
At the time of its construction, it was the highest tower building west of the Mississippi. A few years later, there was a tower in Seattle that dwarfed it by a few feet.
I had no idea it was modeled after the tower in Venice until your presentation. It was fascinating.
Yeah, we didn't know that either, I don't think, until we started getting into the history, and it just, the history was just very fascinating.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tower in Venice as well. And Terry, you were saying the original Venice tower collapsed. What was the story there?
Well, I added in one of the printouts that we got from the library. The tower was originally, let's see, the DNF tower was originally known as the Campanelli Tower. It was the third tallest structure in the U.S. when it was built. It was modeled after Campanelli in Piazza San Marco in Venice, Italy. When completed in 1911, the tower was the tallest man-made structure west of the Mississippi River at 325 feet, or 372 feet with the flagpole, the equivalent of a 26-story building. The only building taller at the time were both in New York City, the Singer and Metropolitan buildings. To put its height into local perspective, the clock tower was over twice as tall as the next tallest buildings, the First National Bank and the Foster buildings in Denver at 160 feet. The DNF Tower was originally adjacent to a 5-story structure at the corner of Arapahoe and 16th that became home to the DNF department store, a shopping destination in the early 20th century. Complete with dapper salespeople, the DNF Tea Room, it rivaled stores in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. So I think it was on the next page where it mentioned that fact. One of the guys, the tower was home to break rooms, a classroom for juvenile employees, and an executive dining room on the 14th floor. The early patrons and tourists were dressed up because everyone dressed better in those days. They would purchase a ticket, hand it to the elevator operator, and ride to the top in the elevator. Waiting for them was the $1 million view and a curio shop. Of course, they had to have a curio shop in the tower. Doesn't that sound familiar? Let's see, where is that? Well, it must be on one of my other sheets about the tower in Italy.
Yeah, well, the tower in Italy seems much larger now than perhaps the original tower that was built there.
Here it is. Frederick Sterner, the tower, designed by Colorado architect Frederick Sterner. The tower was based on St. Mark's in Venice, which had collapsed in 1902 and was being rebuilt at the time, inspiring replicas around the world. The Daniels and Fishers Tower would be a few feet taller, though, prompting the Denver Times newspaper to joke that Venice was building a smaller copy of Denver's tower. So there you have it.
That's great.
So a lot of history.
Yeah.
Do they know why the one in Venice collapsed? Was it an earthquake or something, or just badly built, or not?
It doesn't say in the literature, but I'm guessing it could have been an earthquake.
Yeah.
Of course, we have you have the Leaning Tower of Pisa too, which is still standing but leaning.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I just immensely enjoyed the presentation. Brings back a lot of memories.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have any other questions?
I want to say I've been close to Albuquerque for years. My sister, Janice, lives there and has for 32 years, retiring from Public Service Company of New Mexico. So I visit her a couple times a year and always during Thanksgiving and Christmas. I love the smell of the pinon burning in the fireplaces, and have been coming to Albuquerque for 30 years over the holidays, so I feel close to you guys. And if I'm ever there when you have a meeting and we get back, Denver chapter is finally going to start our in-person meetings at the church. We always have been meeting beginning the fourth Monday of this month because we feel that COVID is on the wane. So we're going to start in-person meetings soon. And we wish you guys luck, and we'll put ourselves on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, and my wife and I don't get down to Albuquerque every year for 30 years, but we've been down several times for the balloon fiesta and thoroughly enjoy that. We bring the RV down and get close and personal to the venue, and it's great fun. We were down there with a pilot a couple of years ago, a small plane pilot, and he'd been in balloons a lot, had piloted one. Anyway, the balloons start to come down, and he would invite us to chase the balloons and help hang on to the baskets and give them ballast if they wanted. It was just great fun. Albuquerque's a great city. We really have a great time down there.
As a brand new second lieutenant, I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base in 66 and 67. It's gone now too.
Yeah, yeah.
We stayed at the Brown Palace. Isn't that walking distance to the tower?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's just it's there. The tower's on the 16th Street Mall, and the Brown Palace is on 17th Street. And yeah, it's within walking distance. It sure is.
And that street's closed to traffic, right? It's got that tram kind of thing?
Yes, yes.
Right.
The 16th Street Mall, yes.
Right, that's nice.
Yeah.
The 16th Street Mall has been in the news on TV just last night. After COVID, some of those businesses folded,
Oh,
and some of them just like, history repeats. Not many tourists downtown, and so the Chamber of Commerce in Denver is encouraging new businesses to come back and inhabit some of those vacant buildings on the 16th Street Mall between upper downtown and lower downtown where the DNF Tower is. And they're giving them 3 months of free rent and incentivizing them with several $1,000s to open up their business. And of course, as you folks have in Albuquerque, we have homeless people living down there. And so they've got to get that whole area up and running, and they're putting $5 million into new housing for homeless soon. So hopefully we'll be back and in business with our tourist trade, and the DNF Tower and Brown Palace and all that will be wonderful places to visit.
Oh, we enjoyed it.
Very much.
Terry, you should open up a clock shop there.
Go.
Yeah, my clock repair days are dwindling.
Okay, do we have any more questions for our presenters? Well,
Buzz, can
gentlemen,
you-
thank you. I know you put a
Yes.
lot of time to preparing this presentation. I think it was
Our pleasure. You can,
interesting, not only from the clock standpoint, but also some Colorado history there.
Do you guys do a show and tell, Buzz, in your meetings?
We have in the past, yes.
We always do that. And thinking about that, I have a clock sitting next to me. It's an Ingram Grecian model, bird's eye maple case, 8-day time and strike. But one of my favorites, I'll just hold it up here in front of the camera,
Oh,
my
wow,
laptop.
Very nice.
nice.
Bird's eye maple on the front. And I bought that at one of our regionals in Denver here years ago from a guy by the name of Ray Horner. So that's my show and tell for the day. And we'll sign off and let you get on with your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you.
Buzz,
David,
are you still
make me host
recording?
again, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you make me host again, please?
Yes, I did that. And can you stop the recording if it's still going?
Let
But I did make you the host, yes.